There's a fitness YouTuber that I admire by the name of Scooby1961. And what I liked about Scooby is that he understands that cardiovascular training is the best thing you can do for your health as far as exercise is concerned.
Yes, cardio is the number one most important thing you can do for your health. It still is.
Now, the average bodybuilder has kind of a misunderstanding about cardio. Now, if I was going to go up to your average bodybuilder or weightlifter and I was to tell them that I do weightlifting and cardio, and if I was to tell them that for my weightlifting, I do a couple sets on a vertical bench press machine and that's my weightlifting taken care of, and then I'd go to an hour of cardio, they would say that that's not near enough weightlifting to have any effect, that you need to do more sophisticated and involved weightlifting. You need to do compound lifts and specific lifts and do progressive overload in order to improve with your weightlifting. But the way I described that I do my weightlifting, just a couple of sets, that's how many of them do their cardio.
I'm gonna go put my socks and shoes on, go down my basement, and do a little bit of cardio. This is primarily a muscle building program. You know, whatever little bit of fruit you just ate, by the time you're done with this cardio, it's gone. I'm not doing it for fat burning purposes. This is purely to accentuate my training. Being able to train hard enough and not have your cardio be a limiting factor is very, very important. You don't want to reach cardiovascular failure before you reach muscular failure. That is a wrap for cardio.
De 45 años, 7 años.
7.
Pero con descansos.
Yo lo primero que entraba a donde me colocaba pedía el día de descanso ya. Y me dice, hago yo, ha entrado usted y ya está pidiendo el día de descanso.
¿Sí?
Understood here is that in order to do proper cardio, in order to improve your cardio, that you need to do the same kind of more sophisticated and more involved cardio training. In order to improve your cardio, you need to do long steady cardio or steady state cardio. You need to do intervals, which are different from HIIT intervals because you are exercising between intervals. You need to do things like max efforts for 30 minutes. In other words, go for 30 minutes as hard as you possibly can. So cardio, in order to advance your cardio, is just as sophisticated and is just as involved as weightlifting is to get your gains as far as strength and as far as hypertrophy of your muscles. So when you do cardiovascular training, when you advance in your cardiovascular training, what happens is your lungs and your heart and your cardiovascular system become more powerful and more efficient at delivering oxygen to your body. Now, I'm sure all of us have gone to the doctor's office and had the thing put on your finger where they check your body oxygen saturation. Your body is very good at regulating oxygen saturation for your body, and that's why this number is consistent. It's very similar to the way your body regulates body temperature. So what your cardiovascular system does is it works as hard or as little as possible in order to maintain that regulation of body oxygen saturation. So I want you to think of cardio in like a supply and demand thing. So your supply is your cardiovascular system supplying oxygen to your body and how efficiently and how good it does that. Your demand is how big your body is and how much oxygen your body is going to demand. And your cardiovascular system doesn't care if that demand is coming from muscle or fat. And a lot of bodybuilders, they like to tell you about the benefits of having all this extra muscle. And one of the benefits that they tell you that muscle has is that it creates this furnace effect where all this muscle has this high metabolic rate, and that burns all this fuel and helps keep you lean. But what they don't tell you is that all this extra muscle also creates an extra oxygen demand for your muscle. So it's very important that when you build extra muscle, that you also build your cardiovascular system to support this extra muscle. So what happens when you have a good supply and demand ratio, in other words, your cardiovascular system is very efficient at supplying oxygen and you're not too big and so there's less demand of oxygen, is what happens is you have a resting heart rate that is much lower. So what happens is when you train your cardiovascular fitness, this improves your oxygen uptake, this improves your efficiency of your heart and lungs to make oxygen, and this lowers your resting heart rate. Now, elite athletes, elite cardio athletes, they can have resting heart rates as low as in the 30s beat per minute, as that compared to people who are morbidly obese who can have a resting heart rate which is well over 100. Now, they did an extensive meta-study about resting heart rate and longevity, and what they found is just about every 1 heartbeat per minute that you raise, you are 1% more likely to die in the next 20 years. And this is aside from any heart disease. So if your resting heart rate is over 100, you have just as much chance to die whether you do or do not have congestive heart failure, whether you do or do not have COPD or any of these other diseases. And that's because a high resting heart rate is a symptom of poor health. Elite cardio athletes can have a resting heart rate as low as in the 30s, while someone morbidly obese can have a resting heart rate well over 100, more than 3 times the resting heart rate. And I want you to think of that in terms of a car's engine. So your cardiovascular system is like a car's engine. So an elite cardio athlete is putting low mileage on their car, they're driving nice and slow, while someone who's morbidly obese is putting very high mileage on their car and they're driving very fast. So you can easily see why having a lower resting heart rate is very good for your longevity and for your health. Now, this can be a problem for extreme bodybuilders and weightlifters as well as morbidly obese people. And here's an example. It's kind of an extreme example. This is someone who abuses drugs. They take steroids. All they care about is getting bigger and bigger. They do not care about their health or cardiovascular at all, it seems. And this causes problems, like I say, a very high heart rate, shortness of breath. And you can see that in this example here.
It's just a weird habit I have. And there's so many different kinds, like this one is just the most craziest one. That's called Tren. This one is just known for very bad side effects. It can cause problems with your sex drive, help you, especially when it gets to that moment, you could have problems. This is by far my favorite one. It's called T400. Basically, it's a blend of fast test, slow test, mixed together. And
now, a lot of weightlifting YouTubers who try to get out of their wheelhouse of lifting weights and get into health and longevity and cardio health can give out some poor advice. Now, in order to prevent an early heart attack, you need to get your weight low, your cholesterol low, and your cardio fitness up. Now, here's an example of some poor health and longevity advice from a YouTube weightlifter who seems to think that more muscle is the cure to everything.
That doesn't mean that you, who work a fucking desk job, who just don't want to fucking die by the time you're 45 from a coronary situation, you don't need to fucking worry about that shit. You need to worry about getting some fucking calories burnt. You need to worry about building up some, some muscle to your skeleton so you can be fucking healthy and move yourself around. You need to worry about that shit.
So again, I want to emphasize that if you decide that you are going to lift weights and you're going to make gains, it's very important that you help support the extra body mass that you've put on with cardio training, with progressive overload cardio training. Because your cardiovascular system does not care if it's muscle or fat that's creating this demand. In fact, muscle creates more demand than fat. They did an extensive meta-study of cardiovascular fitness and resting heart rate, and they found that resting heart rate correlates very strongly with longevity. In fact, they found out that about every 1 heartbeat per minute at your resting heart rate that you increase your chance of dying in the next 20 years by 1%. And the people that had a very high heart rate, they died at just the same rate, regardless of whether they did or did not have heart disease or COPD or these other kinds of diseases. And this is because a high resting heart rate is a symptom. It's a symptom of very poor health. So if you really are concerned about your health, if you really are concerned about your longevity, you need to take cardiovascular training seriously. You need to do the progressive overload, the more sophisticated and more involved type of cardio that improves your cardiovascular health. Now, Scooby 1961, he stopped doing fitness videos in 2020 and has started doing travel videos. And me, on the other hand, I started doing fitness videos in 2020. So I hope to convey his message and continue his message that he had been telling everyone that cardiovascular fitness is the most important exercise, fitness type of activity that you can do for your health and your longevity. So there's really only two things you can do to help your supply and demand ratio and lower your resting heart rate, and that's one thing for each aspect. So for the supply side, you need proper cardiovascular training, and for the demand side, you need to reduce calories and reduce your body weight as much as you can in a healthy way.